So, thank you everyone for joining today. On behalf of Vidhi and Camera Research team, I welcome you all for Book Adda with Pranay Lal. I think he doesn't need any introduction because when I chaired this event, and many of us said that I have read Indica. Really fascinating talk, and how this thing evolved is that we were just chatting 2 weeks ago with Pranay, and we were going to some wetland. And we're discussing about how our fossils are ignored, and there's a lot of stories which we don't usually know. And Pranay's book Indica is quite famous. Everyone, I think that is a very important book in terms of natural history of India. And there's one more second part also. It's for the Invisible Empire. Yeah, and this book has won many awards, which we have also mentioned when we shared this event that this book, Indica got the best debut book at the Tata Lit Festival, Delhi Book Fair Award in 2017. It was also listed as among the Mint's 50 most significant books about India since independence. And his second book, Invisible Empire, The Natural History of Violences, both published by Penguin, also received multiple awards and was named among the 20 best non-fiction books of 2021 by GQ, and also won the Green Lit Festival Award 2023. And these books are also translated into various languages, and many people have written about excerpts from these books. Today, he will be talking about a little bit about his book, and also specifically about the history of dinosaurs in India. He has a presentation to show, and after that, we also ask him questions. And Pranay is also a climate change activist. He has been environmental activist here associated with Bombay Climate Action Group since maybe I think even I was not born maybe that time. He's active then. So he's one of the persons who we also get inspiration from. His work. So, and he is also a public health expert. So, and our health team has worked worked with Pranay. So Pranay has also a long association with Vidhi. and he was telling me that he has traveled across all districts of India except 4, and almost all countries. No. Yeah. So Pranay, please, I welcome you. Please, yeah.
Thank you so much. Is it sound good? Yes, is it okay? Can we have the presentation so that this doesn't keep jamming up and down? The presentation is focused on information. Great. So, when I came this morning, couple of minutes ago, I thought I would talk about, I'd give you an option. That should we talk about what we know about climate change from deep past? But I think it's already been advertised that I have to speak about dinosaurs, so here it is. So what was told to us when we were children that, maybe it was not even told to us. The fact is that, we knew that dinosaur existed, right? Mr. Spielberg told us that perhaps all the dinosaurs lived in America, and we were never told that there are any dinosaurs in India because we never inquired, right? As children, were there any dinosaurs in India, that kind of stuff. Also, there are lots of other problematic things with dinosaurs. I mean, if such giant creatures live, what lived before them, right? So I don't think that history is known either. That before the dinosaurs, I mean, was there something that was microscopic, and then you had a blob, and then you had maybe a lizard or a frog, and then suddenly sprawling, you got a dinosaur, right? That's not how evolution happened. Dinosaurs in the history of life were very late entrants, just like us, right? So I'm just going to go very quickly into this whole story of dinosaurs. I'm just trying to compress their 200 odd million years of reign on the planet. These were the most fantastic creatures, the most fantastic vertebrates that ever lived. Not because they looked terrorizing or they were so gigantic, but for the sheer diversity and the number of habitats they lived in, from deserts to freezing Arctic. Antarctic. There was no Arctic, by the way. So the Antarctica was still an icy planet in some of the years that they lived in. And they used to migrate into Antarctica and survive. They used to survive quite well in frozen temperatures. A slight change there. Right. So I just want to begin by taking you to a map that has been reconstructed of how the world looked 290 million years ago, right? And this is the time when dinosaurs were really tiny. Right? There were other creatures that were dominating the landscape. But this is where India was. This is sandwiched between Antarctica. So you could go from Chennai to Antarctica, without a visa, or without even taking a long ferry. But the icy landscape was also part of the Indian landscape. And look at Africa, look at South America. All of us are, joined together at the hip, so as to say, look at it in the grand view of things. And Greenland was actually green. It's here, right? It was a tropical paradise, and much of the world was very, very green. And you had, because all the land was congealed together, you had a massive ocean, right? So think about it. Your monsoons and other systems would be very, very different. Okay. Now let's move to how did the forest look at this time? You didn't have large, gigantic flowering plants, the broadleaves, none of those. You had creatures or plant creatures like these. Can we switch off the lights, please? Yeah. Sorry, is this sharper? Is this better? Yes. Great. Now, these are palm-like things, but they're not palms, they're cycads. The ones that are diminutive creatures, diminutive plants that are there in your gardens, beautiful, deep green colored cycads. They were much taller and bigger. By the way, sabudana comes from cycads. So now, of course, it is made from synthetic material, but our ancestors used to make sabudana from this plant. Oops. And you had other giant tree ferns, but you had this tall plant, which is called a lycopod. This is the ancestor of the moss. The moss that you see now on walls, they could be as tall as that. So I'm talking here of about 25, 30 meters. That's how tall they will grow, right? If you notice, there's water here. It's not pure, you don't see soil, it's not ground, it's shallow water that's covering this. Much of the land at the time had water, ingress of water from the giant oceans. What this did was the profuse amount of vegetation that existed would get washed by the force of the oceans and the seas, and it would go and deposit this in a shallow basin. And that's how much of the Gondwana and our cousins, Australia, Madagascar, Africa, India, Antarctica, all these continents are called the Gondwanan continents, right? Named after the Gonds, the Indian tribe, the Gonds. This would go and get deposited in basins. And that's how all our coal and petrol got found. So what we take out in a jiffy, right? It's extracted within weeks, comes to our homes, either as petrol or lignite or coal, and we burn it like this. But remember, this took millions of years in making. And it was conspired and made by plants and trees like these, right? So what are the creatures that lived at this time? Well, the landscape was dominated by these creatures. These are amphibians, the ancestors of frogs. So the land was dominated by these creatures called Dinosaurs. They were herbivores, but they were, carnivorous amphibians also that really lethal looking. But they, like cows, would go in herds, like antelopes, and they would go for a very long distance, right across continents, because remember, all the continents were joined. So they would move around in circular patches across these continents. And this creature here is the ancestor of the modern crocodile, right? And the creature here is a reptile, but the creature of our real interest is this one called Thanaxodon. Now, it looks like a mammal, but it's not a true mammal. It's a mammal-like reptile, right? It's got a hollow fang and a hollow jaw. It's got a scaly tail. It's got hair-like cover, but it's very bristly. And it's got a scaly leg and talon-like hands and feet. So it's got reptilian features, but it's not yet a true mammal. Now, what happens at this time, and I'm coming to my second book now, this creature, or a related creature, which was an egg-laying creature, got infected by a series of viruses. And that infection gave it the ability to produce a placenta. And then it became a true mammal. So our journey begins from the ancestor or a creature like this, which got infected by a virus and therefore gave us the ability to have a placenta. Now, there are two reasons why I'm telling you this story. One, that mammal evolution is a story of a viral infection triggering that diverges from a mammal-like reptile to a mammal, right? And that the placenta is actually a viral gene. Think about it. You and I are born because of courtesy of a viral infection that happened to our ancestors, right? Now, most gynecologists don't know the story. The reason why many women can't conceive, whether they have ectopic pregnancies, do you know what ectopic pregnancy means? That means the placenta is outside the realm of the cavity in which it should be held and it gets ejected out, right? What is called spontaneous abortion. Now, why does that happen? That's because your immune system, the woman's immune system, recognizes the placenta as a viral gene and it throws it out, right? Now, that's a story that no natural historian, or rather, sorry, no gynecologist will tell you, right? So it takes, the understanding of gynecology, of virology, and natural history, and understanding this creature to understand when was the first mammal made. And so this is the time, 280 million years ago or thereabouts, that the first true mammals emerge. Okay? Now the descendants of this guy continue to live with us in very small numbers, like the platypus, right? They're still egg-laying mammals, right? Or echidna, there's several other. I think there are nine what are called monotremes, right? That are still egg-laying mammals, right? But then 251 million years ago, something cataclysmic happened, in which the seas started to belch out a lot of methane. Now, methane, as you know, is a very strong, very potent greenhouse gas. The Earth started to warm. Now we don't know what caused it, but this is the single greatest extinction that happens because the heat that emerges from this volcanic induced methane release is so intense that virtually all creatures die. But some of them survive, like some sharks in some pools, some turtles, some tortoises, the ancestors of our mammals, the Thrinaxodon, for example. In fact, most of sorry, whoops, what happened here? Why is this not? I'm sorry, this is going. Whoops. I want to go back and I can't. I don't know what's going on. There you go. Sorry, just give me a favorite piece of what you use. Oops. Can you restart it, please? Peggy slide Pajani. Sorry about this. Just come. Up is the room, slide number 4. Thank you. Sorry, it's okay now. I'm trying to read back. So, the point I was making here is that, this mammal is the one that is, the ancestor of this mammal and the infected true mammal were among the survivors. Otherwise, you and I would not exist. So everything that exists today, one of their ancestors did survive, but 95% of all types of plants and animals and microbes and everything else just died out. So they survived in pools or in some caves or in some rock crevices where the methane did not reach or the effect of the methane did not reach. Methane kills in two ways, heat and poison, right? You inhale it, you die, right? Okay, I'll go to the next one. So after the 251 million extinction event, there was some creature that survived. Well, one of them was this creature, which evolved from a true reptile, an ancestor of the dinosaurs. Now, fossil of this was discovered in a town, rather now, it's now a town, but at one time, a very tiny village called Maleri. Maleri is in Andhra Pradesh, right? So most dinosaurs in India are named after Maleri. the place, and Saurus being lizard, right? So the lizard of Malaria, 235 million years ago, they found an impression of this creature exactly like this. Think about it like this. So we know how it moved. It's not because it got crashed like this, because of the position of the bones and how the creature is designed. We know that this creature could actually run on its two legs. So there's another lizard like this in Costa Rica called basilisk, right? It walks on water. So it's called the Jesus lizard for that reason, because it can actually skim over the surface of water. We don't know whether this skimmed over water, but we know for a fact that it has the ability to run or walk on two of its feet. It's rare feat. Another creature from a little later is Alvolcaria, which is the name of no village, but Al Walker and his lizard. So Al Walker's lizard. Al Walker was a very important dinosaur hunter. He came to India for a short while and he found this fossil. And basically, it's again a chicken-sized creature with some feather-like protrusion, but we're not sure whether it was feather, because this is again a little early for feathers to evolve. But it looks a little fuzzy and kind of blurred in the fossil. We don't have a full fossil, by the way. Finding articulate fossils in India is a problematic thing because soils and rocks in India have been worked so much, both by natural forces as well as humans, because India's rocks have got pulverized by several actions. Because, as you notice, think about where India was next to Antarctica, sandwiched between Africa and Madagascar, and this will separate and come to this place. So India has moved a lot. It's kind of collided and crushed and separated from all these lands for several such episodes. And the other thing, of course, we end up dynamiting, tilling, running rollers and all that. So there's nothing pristine in India. India is perhaps the most overworked soil and landscape in the world. But among the first discoveries, I mean, there are some examples of, ancient texts talking about giant bones being discovered, right? But the first true example of any discovery was this guy called William Sleeman. Now, anybody knows who William Sleeman is? He's a very famous man. Very, very famous. Absolutely. The man who ended Thuggy in India. Now, he was a very charismatic guy. He's got many firsts to his name. In fact, there's a statue of his in Nagpur. And William Sleeman, in fact, there's a Hollywood film made on him, on the Thuggy, in which Pierce Brosnan is acting. So in case you want to watch it, it's only a part of the Thuggy movement. It's a pretty interesting film. It's called The Deceivers. But let's come back to Sleeman here. Sleeman was actually a person who was posted across India, mostly to a region between, between Calcutta and Nagpur, I mean, north of the Vindhyas. In in Jabalpur, he found a series of very good fossils, which were these large fossils, backbone vertebrate fossils of a grass-eating creature, which is called a Dinosaurs. But for many years after the discovery, notice that it took 40 years for it to be described, although he collected it and sent it to Calcutta. It was for about 40 years it took that much time. Now remember, of course, the Indian War of Independence happened in 1857, and it took many, many years for the British to consolidate the collections and all of those things. But the name was finally given nearly 50 years after, right? Now this is the creature, right? And notice that this tree is called an Oricaria, which is now only found in Chile, in one forest of Chile, right? Oricaria is what we call the monkey buzzard tree, right? And it's there in every garden. I'm sure if I walk 100 meters here, I'm going to find it. It's so common, it's just most abused. It's like bougainvillea, it's there everywhere. Now, the problem is that, the extinctions have happened of trees and isolation of trees because of various factors. And we'll come back to that a little later. Titanosaurus, as you notice, is a massive creature, about the size of two down-decker buses. And the strategy of how it used to eat was not to graze on the ground. It's only the younger ones who could eat on the, grazing on the ground, because if you're in the down, it's so difficult for you to, bend your neck and eat. So they tend to stand, they use their tails as a tripod they put their weight on, the tail and the two legs and stand up like this and reach to the higher branches. Right? They have the ability to graze for a very, very long distance. Right? But the biggest of all grazing dinosaurs, I mean, India is one of the contenders, and this is called Barapasaurus. Bara means big, pa matlab paw, and saurus means lizard. So they found a bone. So, like I said, you don't find entire fossils, of the entire bone. So they found, I think, one of this and a thigh bone. That's it. And I think a few uh, uh, vertebrae as well. So this was named as Barapasaurus tagorai because that was the 150th birth anniversary of Tagore. So that's how this was named as. The problem is this, that, in India, we don't have a legislation on fossils. So as soon as fossils were discovered, they were either photographed, carried back to Geological Survey of India and, kept there, not available for display. And invariably, these fossils were lost. So there's no accountability. There's no rule or legislation for conservation of fossil sites. Now, we don't have the fossil for this discovery. So as a result, this is called a nomen dubium. That means name of dubious kind, right? Because if in the scientific world a fossil is not presented again for future research, it does not exist. Although there was a paper written about it, but future scientists want to get a sense of what this fossil would have looked like. They want to compare it with new discoveries and other things. But sadly, this fossil is lost. So I write in my book that the best place to find fossils is not to go to the field. It's best to go in the back of departments of geology, and you will find them. Because think about it, a professor, when he retires or she retires, they don't have large homes in which they can keep their collections, right? All they can do is, throw them out. And these could be massive, very important discoveries. They could be very beautiful fossils, but they just have to leave it because they just can't take them, right? And there is no place to deposit it. There are no repositories in this country. So as a result, there is a huge black market for fossils. So you have, the Polish, the Germans, the Americans, everybody comes and takes huge quantities of fossils, and we never get to see that, right? So Barapasaurus lost because of callousness, lost because there was no accountability of the government, and the government itself does not place accountability on the public funds that go into research of this kind. So there is a general malaise about wanting to know or wanting to tell about the deep past, right? But if you have such great dinosaurs, there's got to be a predator, right? So we hadn't discovered a predator for a very long time. So we found one. When I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of paleontologists. I have not found any fossil. I mean, I've found fossils, but not nothing of relevance. So this is called Rajasaurus. Raja was king, and Saurus, as you know, lizard. It was discovered in 1982. It was wrapped in, the rock, the entire rock in which the bones were embedded, was just collected and left in a basement and forgotten. When it was rediscovered, perhaps somebody went into the basement, I don't know what, and then got rediscovered. And the paper finally got published in 2003. So till 2003, we did not have a major predator known to us, right? Now, there might be several others, because in America, you've got about 30 or 40 large predators, right? Baryonyx and some fascinating ones, right? In India, we found this one to be the biggest. Now, this is not too big if you compare it with T-Rex. But this, if it were to find or perhaps engage with the T-Rex, they lived in different times and different continents. But if we were to do a WWE or a UFC kind of a fight, this guy would win. You know why? Because although he's smaller, but he's stouter, he's got a bigger tail, he's got a stronger bite. T-Rex might be bigger, but this might win. It's like Mike Tyson beating Evander Holyfield or so anybody who follows boxing. Now, the other thing about this creature is that, T-Rex and creatures like this were not chasers alone. They would use stealth. They would use a lot of camouflage to actually attack. Because think about it, they're not cheetahs, they're leopards. And leopards usually don't chase. They usually stalk, they wait, and they hide in the milieu in which they are. It makes no sense for you to chase and not succeed in fighting or finding a prey for yourself, right? So most paleontologists now agree that instead of what Mr. Spielberg showed, which is kind of true, that they do chase, but it's not an open country chase that happens the way it does. They would be crouching even if there was foliage. The other thing that you should recall is that grasses had not evolved until this time. Grasses evolved much later, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. But if you were to construct the scene of India's, like we see, okay, a lion is fighting it's got a kill, and then the jackals and hyenas trying to, those kind of things. Think of Lion King, for example, right? I mean, that's a classic case. But if you were to look at a scene like this, you have the T-Rex, and you've got a smaller creature, but not the apex creature, but hunted in pairs, or maybe 3 or 4, like wolves, which would challenge. It's called Indosuchus. The smaller ones are Indosaurus, and these were like the smaller foxes, or smaller creatures that would actually pick on pieces of flesh as the big guys are fighting, right? And of course, the Titanosaurus that have been killed by the T-Rex, by the Rajasaurus, is now trying to keep away these other competitors. This is a nest of dinosaur eggs. India has the largest collection of dinosaur nests in the world. Okay, so if you were to go from somewhere near, I mean, there's one very nice location near Jabalpur. You've got near Bath. You've got near Baroda. I mean, there's several of them. But wherever you've got the dinosaur eggs, you also have cement factories. So much of us dinosaur eggs end up becoming tuna. Yeah, all of it. So you will never get to see them. In fact, I mean, many paleontologists say this, that if we were prudent enough and save them, we would be able to give each classroom in India, not school, each classroom of India, a very good dinosaur egg to keep. And they could keep it, look at it, admire it, aspire to find more dinosaur eggs. And this is only one kind. We find varieties of them, right? And we had the largest dinosaur hatchery in the world near Baroda. But it is, when you go and see it, you see that this is another example. For example, this is near Bagh in Madhya Pradesh. And this is a collection of dinosaur eggs. This is a tribal mandir. And they think it's a Mahashivlinga. They don't let you take photographs, but I got permission from them. But, it's in a cave. So they must have found it, put it there, and they've been worshipping it for hundreds of years. But when I take a picture of this, it's pretty much like the one you just saw. But does anybody know what this is? Guess? Tooth. Good one. What else? Cross what? Egg. Cross section of an egg. No. Cross section of a bone. Okay. So this is dinosaur potty. This is dinosaur fossilized potty. So the question you should ask is, how do we know? Right? Always ask it. How do you know this is potty? Right? So, okay, how do we know? Because this is very rich in phosphorus and potassium. If you analyze this, it's just got fossilized because of high amount of silica that has kind of exchanged and fossilized. Now, why is this unique? Is because when the cross section was made, this is the earliest fossils of grasses. So the grasses, until this time, till the discovery of this fossil, it was believed that it was China that's the point of origin of grasses. But this discovery of dinosaur potty actually tells us that it is found in the Indian subcontinent. Okay? That's glass. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the incredible fossils that was discovered again in Baroda, not too far from the cement factory, was a snake which was eating new hatchlings of dinosaurs. The the sauropods. Remember the big guys who were eating Araucaria trees, medium trees? So they were eating new hatchlings, and it was a giant nesting site in which one of the hatchling sites they found a snake which was preserved quite beautifully. They've been found in Baroda is because not because there were more dinosaurs there, because there's more snake. There is better preservation of the rock and the Cretaceous. No, because it's calcareous rock that has got preserved. And so, I mean, we know that there would have been dinosaurs, for example, in Sri Lanka, but the problem is there are no rocks preserved which would have those fossils. I mean, the rock formation, the preservation of that rock did not happen there. So, I mean, they would have been in, say, Kerala, but Kerala has no rocks from that age. I mean, they don't have any young rocks. So, this is called Sanaje indicus. Sanaje means a snake that can open its mouth big, right? And again, this took several years before somebody else came from abroad, analyzed it, and said this is a unique snake, perhaps one of the biggest to be discovered in terms of fossil snakes. Fossil. No, this is a reconstruction. Okay. I mean, if I showed it to you, it would be very no. I mean, fossils they are never like this. Yeah. They're just so boring. I mean, but unless you see the story. So, how did it get preserved? Is your question, right? हमें ये कहानी कैसे पता? Yeah, and also did snakes also have like limbs and all? They did. In fact, there are two snakes that still have limbs. We don't see them: pythons and boas. So if you look at them, they also have hips and they have tiny, very tiny legs that are, but now that they crawl or burrow, they don't need the legs anymore. But early snakes did have legs, very tiny ones. But this fossil got preserved because there was a flash flood and it smothered the snake and it couldn't come out and it died under the weight of the sand, right? And the silt that fell that day. And the eggs got preserved, the snake died of suffocation, and the fossil got preserved, right? It's a very rare event. So, I mean, fossil formation is a very rare event. It has to have just the right conditions, the right chemicals. And the rock has to stay preserved for a long time for us to discover. Like I said, there are no fossils in the Malabar region. That's because the rock formation, the sand formation, the collection of the sediments did not happen, right? Can anybody make out what this is? Other than the A group, yeah? Huh? Open. Okay. Anything else? Any other guesses? Okay. It is a footprint. Yes. So it looks like a trident, right? This is a trident, and this rock was found in Jaisalmer, and I was there. It was not the time when it was discovered, but I've seen the rock. It was a beautiful piece of rock where you had two footprints going like this for about 20-25 meters, right? And when the road expansion happened from Jaipur to Jaisalmer, this rock was lost. We went and petitioned with the district collector and others. They said, show me a legislation which says fossil and fossil trackways have to be preserved. I'll save it. There's none, so you can't preserve it, right? This is the teacher that would have perhaps created it. Something like the Alvolcaria, but this is more recent. Alvolcaria, if you remember, was soon after the great extinctions that happened, one of the early creatures, but that body design survived. So in nature, if there's a body system or a design that is successful, there is no reason for the creature to change, right? Crocodiles, snakes, cockroaches, they've survived 200-250 million years. Why should they change their body size, right? So this is another creature during the times of the dinosaurs was extremely successful. So from the earliest Alvolcaria to this creature, because we haven't found the fossil, we can't name it, but we only found the footprints. Right? So let's come to 200 million years. The ice has vanished. It's still a tropical paradise. Look at Greenland. It is now sandwiched between Western Europe and America. I mean, Donald Trump will be very happy seeing this, that it was quite close to them. But India is still here, and India is now much closer to, say, Perth. So, again, from Calcutta to Perth, anybody who follows cricket, two great cricket pitches, right? It's right here, right? And Madagascar is right here, and, Ethiopian coffee could have been exported, but of course, none of these were there, The beauty of this is that, despite it being a closed land system, you have ocean circulation system and weather systems that keep much of the earth quite nice and green, right? The monsoons of this time were pretty prolific. You don't have large deserts except for those that you see here in Russia and in China. And a few along the eastern margin of America, like Boston would have had a kind of a desert, something that you can't imagine now, right? But let's move 120 million years later because the world, the world's map has changed. There are big uh, volcanic activity that starts to happen, and these start happening in the oceans. Most of the volcanic activity that happens in the world is in the seas because that's where the Earth's crust is weakest, right? So if you were to look at, imagine the Earth's surface to be like an egg, right? Now, if there is another layer of the shell that I put, but if it's only the weakest part would be the place where the shell is most deep, right? Where it is most easy for the volcanic activity, the lava to come from below and separate it. So when we say the land is moving, it's actually the sea parting. It's not that the land is itself moving, it's the sea that is spreading, what's called the sea floor spreading, right? So underwater volcanic activity that begins in, off the coast of India and Madagascar is called the Morondova St. Mary's. Anybody here from Bangalore? Anybody been to Bangalore?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there is the famous St. Mary's Island. You go and see the sea.
Yes.
It's a very beautiful. That's what the St. Mary's event is. It was created by the same volcanic activity. And if you were to go look at Morondova and St. Mary's, they're identical. The rocks are identical, right? And so this volcanic activity breaks India apart from Madagascar. There's several other events that happen. There's one called Kerguelen, there's the Rajmahal traps, all of them bring India and from its neighbors. I'm just showing you this one. So this volcanic activity creates this. In India, we also find flying reptiles from the volcanic age, from the Cretaceous age, the age of the dinosaurs. And one interesting story that emerged was there were these two paleontologists in the 50s, looking for fossils and looking for minerals in a place called Kota in Andhra Pradesh. They were looking for a place at lunchtime, some place to have their lunch, right? And they go and into somebody's house, a farmer's house, and while they're sitting and eating, they see a kind of a vague design on a stone that is actually on a wall of a stone. And it turns out after they finish the meal, they have a look at it. It's the only flying reptile that we found in India, which is in a farmer's wall. And again, this fossil is lost. It got printed. Again, think about it in the 1950s, early 60s. Printing quality was very poor. Indian journals are anyways a very poor quality of publishing and printing. This got published. It looks like nothing. It looks like as if somebody spat on the wall, because that's how it actually looks when it's printed. I'm sure that the original fossil would look very beautiful, but again, it's lost. Nobody kept it. We don't know what happened to it, right? But 68 million years ago, series of volcanic activity happens. This is very decisive point there because this is something that determines India's fate even today. Now, the first volcanic activity happens at the border of where India and Pakistan are today, right? Somewhere there. And it spreads as far as Jhalawar, in Rajasthan. So that's the area of the place where it happens. And even North Gujarat. If anybody knows Dinosaurs, any Gujarati here? Anybody from Gujarat? Okay. Dinosaurs is a very beautiful volcanic lake in Mehsana district. But when we say volcanic activity of the Deccan, it wasn't just volcanoes. They were also flat, plateau-like things which were bubbling with lava. So it would have looked something like this, tall, very tall, persistent release of lava gases and ash into the air. Now, ash, although lava is hot, the immediate area is warm, but as soon as the ash goes up, it covers the atmosphere and it reflects the sun's light back into the atmosphere. So in effect, the whole world starts to cool. Okay. Now, once the world starts to cool, the giant trees are the first to die. First, because there's very little sun, so they don't have photosynthesis. And the pines, the tall Araucaria pines, don't like too much frost, right? And they start to die. And as this begins to happen, The big dinosaurs, which actually depend on the tall trees, don't have much food to eat. So over a period of time, 100,000 years, maybe 500,000 years, maybe 1 million years later, they start to die. The big dinosaurs, right? So what happens around this time is that you start seeing, I mean, going back a little, but dinosaurs, the point that I was making earlier about the incredible variety of dinosaurs is the fact that they were, of amazing variety of sizes, and they continue to innovate in their own body type and body style, right? And they kept the body type for the same period. So you had this shape surviving till the end, till Rajasaurus existed, right? And this shape that you saw in the first, the Alvolcaria, it survived till very late. And then emerged the first two birds, right? The first ones could glide and then they could actually flap and fly, right? But this is the time when the extinctions begin because of the volcano and the big meteor that falls near Mexico, which kills all the dinosaurs, right? And this is the time when the diminutive mammals, our ancestors, this guy, which was entirely nocturnal, decides to explore the territory. The fear of dinosaurs is now much less. But after the extinction of the dinosaurs, it's not our time yet. It's not the mammals. Trying to take the top spot on the land crocodiles. Okay, the crocodiles are still there, right? And the giant birds. And the giant birds included the ancestors of the emu, the ostriches, very, very tall. Moas. There was something called the elephant bird, very big, terror birds. I mean, they were called the terror birds of Latin America. Very, very big birds. But this creature starts to, find new niches. It finds new opportunities. But this is also the time when flowering plants come, right? And flowering plants are the ones that actually offer you opportunities to look at evolution of new types of mammals. Now, the thing I'm going to do is stop here and want to do some funny stuff, right? Despite having understood the science of dinosaurs, our understanding of dinosaurs in India remains pathetic. And you can see that here. So we've got Motu. I don't know if anyone of you have read, you're too young, but my time we used to read this. Motu Patlu Chotu, Lotboat. I don't know whether you guys know this, but we had this, right? And it was ridiculous the way teachers of the past were shown. Let me just show you a couple more. This film is on YouTube. If you really want to flagellate yourself, torture yourself, and if you think you're running low on inspiration, go and see this film because it will make you feel very good. And this is, Dara Singh, and some of you have heard of Dara Singh, right? Okay. Now this is Dara Singh fighting Wo Bhayanak Jhamkali, So dinosaurs were called, even if you look at the first Hindi remake Hindi dub of Jurassic Park, it says, Wo dekho Bhayanak Jhamkali. So it was like, funny. Right? So nonetheless, Mumtaz is, those of you who are fans of Mumtaz, you will realize she's in this, looking very pretty. But even in 2017, now here's a creature. I'm not going to look at the Tamil films and other things because I flagellate myself by watching these bad films. But I'm interested to see how bad can design get. But here's the creature. Yeah, it's got it's a high budget film. You've got Ashish Vidyarthi as the villain. You've got this guy Jackie Shroff, and you've got Mithun Chakravarti. And I'm not even talking about the heroines. The heroines are also pretty good. But here's the creature. Okay. Now, if this creature is a terror in the jungle, I can't understand why does it have to have these teeth? Because these kind of teeth are found in, say, viper fish. If you go to deep sea, you have those kind of fish that eat other fish, but those kind of teeth, right? So these are classical teeth of fish eaters. Now, if you're a dominant feature in a jungle or tropical jungle in which this film was set, this is a thing that you don't want to have, right? For one reason that if you are the dominant creature, this is a complete waste of energy to produce this because there's nobody else to challenge you, right? So what is the point having these spikes and spines, right? And how would you move if you're moving through a forest? Tree branches and other things will keep, stopping you. They will get stuck in between and, those kind of things. And so many other things. I mean, why do you need claws of this kind? And why do you need extra spikes? I mean, just to bring in the fear factor, you don't have to, make a complete mess of a Frankenstein, right? So these are my two books, and I'm happy to, take any questions that you may have. And thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed speaking with you. And if you have any questions which I think I can answer, I will be very happy. With the switch to the
I have a question.
I'm not a moderator as well. Maybe moderator. Please,
There is a possibility of dinosaurs returning.
Returning to the world on their own without human agency?
Like either through human intervention or without.
Well, Jurassic Park can be done. That's not a problem. I mean, we have DNA of several, even if we don't have the DNA, it's easy to reconstruct. Not so difficult. I mean, let's not say easy. Whether they can be brought back from the dead, yes, it is possible. Should we be doing it? Absolutely no.
Why not?
Because we don't have the same trees, we don't have the same things. They will end up. So if you're getting the plant eaters, they won't survive, right? And if you look at the giant carnivores, they don't. They will need 20 elephants a week to eat or something like that, right? How are we going to feed? We need to create an entire ecosystem for them to survive.
Okay, so like millions of years ago when dinosaurs did exist, so they were the primary creatures on land. There were no other animals.
No, they were all of them. The reptiles, the snakes, everybody was there. Right? No, elephants are all mammals came much later, right? वो तो छोटे थे ना. I showed it to you. They were like descending from the trees and coming out of the walls and holes. And only after the demise of the giant birds and the land crocodiles did the mammals evolve into what they were. Yeah, the diversification of mammals happens after the subjugation of or the internecine battle. The crocodiles and the birds fought so much that they caused each other's extinction, and that's how the mammals.
Continuing to what she asked, I really last there is some woolly mammoth is being revived, and it is projected that it will help in climate change. So can you share your opinion about that? How
it's controversial because the woolly mammoth did live at a time when there was ice as well as prairies in the same area. Now the challenge is that we know that there's a huge amount of biomass that these herds of woolly mammoths and other creatures, woolly rhinoceros, all of those creatures did. The assumption is that what woolly mammoths would do is consume a lot of biomass, convert it into compost in the form of their feces, and they will trample on grass. That means the carbon burial will happen faster. That's why I wanted to actually talk about my second presentation. But yeah, we can delve into this. The challenge is this: none of this was proven, right? And we don't know how much grass they will bury, and whether that burial and the burial is very temporary. See, remember the time I told you that the large sinking of of biomass happened 252 million years ago during the time of the extinction, when the flash floods would happen and take down those, that second or third image I showed you, that lovely tropical forest. Now, that meant that the biomass went and got deposited in a basin. In the case of the woolly mammoth and the woolly rhinoceros and all the other giant mammals, is going to be that they are only going to trample it, right? How much of this is going to go down 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet is going to take 20, 30, 40 years. In that time, the decomposition happens again. The carbon cycle is short. We need the burial of the kind that happened 251 million years ago. That means the biomass is taken together and put in a deep reservoir, the permanent place of burial. This is not going to work.
okay? Okay,
This is news.
lower order question. But you talked about how we don't have a legislation to protect fossils. Now, I'm just curious to know what would that kind of protective framework look like, and are there good examples of that which you've seen in other places? I'm thinking theoretically it's not a very difficult thing to have had. So I'm just wondering about, if you could tell us a little more about what a protective framework could look like. Then, how do you distinguish between, like, every kind of little fossil and a grand fossil? Or would you need to make that distinction as well?
See, I think the wonderment.
Fossils, there's so many.
Absolutely. I think the wonderment of finding your first fossil is amazing. The first time you find it on your own and you realize that, the first time you get something interesting, an interesting pattern on a rock, a child will run up to you. Or even the first one that I found, I will go to a paleontologist, sir, ye fossil hai kya? Nahi hai. And then you get disappointed. Oh God, this doesn't turn out to be a fossil. But when it truly is, you feel, it's a eureka moment for you. So I think that sense of wonder, that sense of achievement and amazement needs to be put to every child. And I don't think we're doing that. I think you never know what you find. There's so many people who accidentally find something and it's unique. So it gets named after, a child in Australia recently found a unique species of a snail, which is kind of path breaking, and it changed, the taxonomy and the timelines of fossils. Coming to legislation, I think most countries who have good museums and they respect their landscapes and their landforms have a very good legislation. You can't steal a fossil from China. Try doing it. And, even the commercial sale that happens, they give you a certificate that in case the customs official in Beijing or Shanghai or wherever, they ask you, you need to show it. In India, you can take anything. I have taken things and said, ये तो मेरे भगवान की मूर्ति है, ये मुझे शिलान्यास करना है. And everybody says, हाँ, ले जाओ. In carrying, I mean, not even checking, in hand, right? That's how ridiculous it is, right? Now, of course, we compare ourselves with, the countries in Africa and other poorest of the poor countries, which don't have the bandwidth to implement this, and they don't even know what exists in their countries. But why should India, which has such a rich history of paleontological research, be so backward in its approach to conserving this amazing wealth? And we don't have a natural history museum. It got burned down, and thank God it got burned down. I mean, it was terrible, that place, right? But I mean, you find, and I don't want to name countries, but even within South Asia, there are countries that have very nice, tiny ones, but pretty good, the fossil collection and the display. We've got only two assembled dinosaurs. Sorry, I'm holding a question. There are only two assembled dinosaurs in India, right? The first one is in the Birla Science Museum in Hyderabad. It clearly says there are no selfies and photographs in front of it, right? It's got a full Codasaurus. It's a beautiful plant eating. Not a giant one. It's kind of nice. It's big, but you can't take photographs, right? The other one is in ISI Calcutta. It's first of all very far from the city, as usually not open to the public. People don't know why should a statistical institute have. Yeah. But some of the finest research under PC Mahalanobis and other people happened there, right? But the challenge is we've not put all those fossils together to tell a story. And just like any museum in India, even the best museums in India, there's nobody there to tell you the story. How did this creature come here, or why does it exist, and where was it found, and what did it eat? There's such interesting stories about each one of them. Not only the story of their discovery, but also about which creatures lived alongside it, or why did it get this big, or any of those interesting aspects that the child doesn't get to know. So as a result, you just see something assembled, and that's it. It's a very dull museum, both of them.
No, Pranay, actually, you have mentioned about this book, Indica also, that ISI is discovered it. And one question I have from the book, I was reading this part. Like, you mentioned that there was a volcanic eruption called Toba, which eradicated the Homo erectus from India. And the one thing which made me curious is that you mentioned that you did some research that large part of the Andhra, Telangana, and this northern Tamil Nadu, which we see today, like experts say, it doesn't have any good forest or elephants, tigers, primarily because of that volcano. Okay, but as we know, we are tracking tigers and elephant. They are large movement, like they move from hundreds of kilometers. So, do you think it is because of volcano, or it's also like Homo sapien based eradication or extinction, like kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there's some paleontologists who believe that the Toba volcano that happened 76,000 years ago, sorry, which reduced the population of Homo erectus. Homo erectus were the immediate, I won't say ancestors, but predecessors of the Homo sapiens, right? And they were huge competitors for Homo sapiens. So they lived alongside, and there were other species of Homos also. There were Denisovans and there were others, that lived all over Central Asia, India, and North India, uh, West Asia, and Mediterranean, that region, right? So we had several species of Homo. Now the question is this: that Toba, what it would have done because of the ash is that it would have caused some fragmentation of forest. And as you know, forest fragmentation and changing the course of the design of forest is pretty important for both the elephant and the large, the water buffaloes, the gaur, the nilgais, all of them. So it kind of would have distorted their provenance. So you see a larger number of the wildcats and the big herding animals predisposed to the Indo-Gangetic belt and the western region, the western corridor, the Vindhyan corridor, right, going down the western Ghats. But this arc from somewhere from middle of Andhra going down to say south of Arcot, or if I can say even Nagpatnam, that arc which has a lot of this fly ash perhaps would have had an early effect on the population size of these animals.
But then to say that present day we don't see elephant tigers because of that event, don't you think it is?
Well, it would have, yeah, I mean, of course, they could have colonized again. 70,000 is a huge time period. And of course, we know their hunting scene photographs from the Cholas and Pandyas and others have shown it. There's no doubt about it. But again, if you look at the paleontological studies, that means you look at pollen studies, right? So we can cut a section of soil if it is well preserved, and we can see in each band what is the pollen of trees and plants and grasses that are available. Typically, South Central India does not have high forests, from deep time. We have very good mangroves. There's no doubt about that part. But South Central India, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, historically had dry deciduous forests, not thick forest. And I mean, that could be also because of the creation of the monsoons. The monsoons have never been so, so well endowed in these parts. So we have a slightly drier part. So I mean, of course, Mudumalai and all those places have elephants, but come east, it becomes a little difficult for them.
Yeah. Any questions? I have more questions, but yes, actually.
I'm reading that it's mostly also around the Narmada basin. There are a lot of eggs, dinosaur eggs are also found. And I think it's one article also mentioned that this was a place that dinosaurs preferred to hatch eggs. I was just wondering what were the kind of reasons that they would have chosen a different or a particular place in specific to be doing that.
Great question. So, the thing is, this is the rock, or this is the layer of rock that has got preserved best. So we know that, we found eggs here. There's also another nice hatchery in Tamil Nadu, in Ariyalur, around that area. We find some interesting fossils. We find dinosaur eggs. But there's no hatchery of the kind that, in Bagh or in Baroda, Balasinore, that area, fabulous, dinosaur nesting sites, going for kilometers. It's not 100 meters, 200 meters, it's not that. It's for kilometers, right? Um, like I said earlier, it's just because there is preservation here, that does not mean that this was the only place where dinosaur nested. I mean, we know that the dinosaurs migrated left, right, and center, but that doesn't mean that they came here to lay eggs and then vanished elsewhere. They would have been there, for example, in Kerala or in Kashmir or in other places where we don't find fossil anymore, but we know that there was there. In fact, there was a dinosaur Kashmirosaurus, right? again, the fossil is lost. So we don't know.
So I like a think question. I will ask the next question. So clearly, like in the millions of years of history, dinosaurs rule the world. Okay, then we Homo sapiens are ruling the world now. When we talk about conservation of wildlife today, now being a Homo sapiens species, now should it be a concern for us if some species get extinct or like some mass extinction happen? And this is a philosophical argument. Some people say that what happens if there is extinction? We are also part of we're part of evolution, and sapiens are now ruling the world. So how do you see the future of Homo sapiens in the whole history of the millions of years we take that time span?
So again, my other presentation would have been beneficial here, but I'll hold you to that. So you remove one creature, and lots of changes happen, right? Just to give you an example, our human gut is very similar to what is found on the surface of all the root crops and other things that we eat, exactly like that. The same organisms are found in our gut. So for 60 years, doctors were misinformed or poorly informed about what was the major organism in our gut. Now I'm telling you the gut story because we know nothing about our insides. Forget outside. Now, if you were to say change everything, you cement the entire thing and you start doing, culturing vegetables in laboratories or whatever, right? That's happening, right? We are going to miss out on a lot of organisms that keep us alive. So for every human cell that we have 3 bacteria or viruses or protists or fungi or chlamydia in our body. So for each human cell, that's how important organisms are. You take out these organisms, you die. As soon as you're born, you're laced by your mothers. If you have a natural birth through the human birth canal, as the fetus comes out and becomes an infant, it passes through the mother's vaginal canal and gets layered by a lactobacilli. And that's the only time that you get that lactobacilli on your skin. Okay? And if you don't get that, you're prone to infections. Okay? Now, if we are going to alter all of that, if you're going to have artificially regenerated babies, and if you're going to have everything changed, starting from the microbe, I think the most important thing in the world in terms of species for survival of this planet are the microbes and the microbial community. Everything else is charismatic in terms of what we want to preserve, what we assign values to. And our value systems are pretty flawed, right? We cherish certain creatures and we don't like the others. And that's a problematic thing. Who decided that, right? Much of our thought is very medieval. In fact, very primitive. I mean, and I'm using the word primitive in the derogatory sense. Actually, primitive tribes are the best people. They live closer to nature and they do the best thing. They conserve their forest. They will keep their water systems absolutely fine. They don't have cholera. They don't have dysentery. But they don't have, the flushing system and the sanitation system that we take pride in. None of that. But yet they don't have those kind of infections. Of course, they don't live beyond 35 or 45, which is a concern. But the fact is, they don't jeopardize the ecosystem for the future generations. The fact that they've survived 25,000 years means that they have lasted longer than civilizations and empires, right? Which I think is an achievement, but we tend to ignore it. So how we assign value is a problematic thing. I think I have digressed from your original question.
No, actually, it's very interesting. This is what I wanted to know. But also, you mentioned about medieval and primitive time. So, do you have any example, like in recent medieval time, like the book of Sapien and other people have written about it, like how we have led to extinction of big fauna from Australia, New Zealand, US, Europe also, India, yes, India also. But do you have any example before the medieval time, like where Homo sapiens have led to extinction of some species?
Absolutely. I mean, woolly mammoth and all these charismatic creatures died both because of climate change and human agency. I mean, there was mass hunting, right? And we used fire and groups of men and women hunting and killing large numbers of these creatures. So that's a well-known thing. Let's look at ostrich. Ostrich used to live in India. If you go to Maharashtra, central Maharashtra, you find um 11,000 to 7,000 years ago, we had ostriches. We used to uh, have their eggs, consume their eggs, and make beads out of them, right? So it's not just modern humans that are causing extinctions. We have been creating extinctions from earlier times as well. Since the discovery of fire, the discovery of the spear, I mean, the projectiles, whether it's stone or spear, uh, we've been killing animals.
Do you think bringing this animals to extinct again, that like example the cheetah introduction project? Now maybe we bring ostrich from like and bring it here. Do you think this works in nature if you introduce species again from different part of the like world?
It's a troublesome question because see, the Indian cheetah was different from the Namibian cheetah. The Indian ostrich is very similar, perhaps very similar to the Iranian ostrich, but the Iranian numbers are very few. We've got ostriches in Iran, right? And we had ostriches in Saudi Arabia. They just got extinct recently, right? So this whole, India and Africa, North Africa, were very similar. The savannas of Africa, very similar. We were connected by this thin corridor, right? But reintroducing these different genetic makeup, they evolved, 7, 8 million years in isolation, in two ends of the spectrum. We don't know how good they were in terms of, I mean, how compatible they would be with our species. For example, they hunt in Namibia, reeboks and springboks and other creatures. Will they hunt a chinkara? Will they hunt a black? I don't know. And the grasses are different, right? I mean, so for example, bringing in the African ostrich, would it eat or survive on Indian grasses? I doubt it, or the Indian insects.
Yeah, any more questions? Yes, many questions. Shari, I will prefer that we go to people who haven't asked. They will come back again.
Yeah. We'll take your question.
Yeah, sure. Malaika and then yeah.
Hello. So I kind of thought of what you said about how we have to build a story around preservation, and I'm kind of curious because I guess even in conservation, for example, like granting a natural like resource of land, rights that you would grant to human, it's kind of like creating a narrative around the conservation. So is there something like that that's been done in terms of preservation for fossils, or are there interesting narratives that are built around preservation in different countries that we can adopt here as well?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, see, we haven't. I mean, I don't know of a case where a great fossil site has got its own, has been given the rights of an individual, right? Like rivers in New Zealand or in some other countries now. But ideally that should be the case because these are archives. They're archives of Earth's past, and if you have a very nice, very rich collection of fossils or any other things, not just fossil, but even just beautiful layers of rock which tell you the story of that landmass from deep time, it needs preservation, right? I mean, not obliteration. The fact is that we have very little respect for what exists, and how does one bring in conservation measures of any kind, or bring in developmental changes without understanding what exists under your feet, right? So I think it's only by getting a larger understanding of what exists under your feet and around you, and how that landscape where you stand came to exist, can you have a deeper appreciation and a deeper understanding, and therefore a sense to preserve and conserve it. I think we are pretty gung ho about decimating a hill or whatever without knowing how it got there. And there might be so much to it. I mean, just because it doesn't have the minerals of your choice, whether it doesn't have oil or uranium or gold or whatever, you say, oh, it's not in this checklist, go ahead and blast it. Well, you never know. So the thing is this, that you need to understand landscapes as repositories of minerals, okay, and microbes. And each landscape is connected to the other. So when rain falls or there's movement of water or any of these things, there is a mineral cycle, and not just a single mineral cycle, but several mineral cycles that are playing together. So there's a potassium and phosphorus and carbon and iron, and all of them are working together. You break one ecosystem, break one landscape, you're going to have crisis. Let me give you an example. In many homes in India, you have a platform called the Kota stone, right? Which is a black stone that is preferred in kitchens of India, right? Or if you go to toilets of five-star hotels, right? There's this beautiful orange, maroon, yellow uh, sandstone called the Abur sandstone, or it's called actually a Abur limestone because it's very rich in lime. It's very beautiful. But both these rocks are nearly extinct. Now you've created cavities on the earth, and when it rains, they actually leach out a chemical. And people say, oh, this is a toxic pool that has got created. Now we need to mitigate this or kind of get it back into, you now need to put other chemicals to neutralize it and make it into a pond. But you created this problem, right? Who told you that? I mean, did you know the carrying capacity of how much you could excavate? You did not. You just were indiscriminate, and you don't know the downstream effects of it, right? So I think this whole problem of conservation and preservation and how we assign values is by itself a very, very problematic thing. And from whose perspective are you looking at it? Because for me, I don't see landscapes or ecosystems in isolation. I see them as a chain. Again, had I done my other presentation, I would have told you why deserts are so important. And when somebody who tells me that, we are going to green the desert, I go completely bonkers at those people. So I mean, whatever the Chinese are doing in China, or the French are doing in the Sahara, or the Americans are trying to do in, their deserts, in Chihuahua or the other deserts, I think it's ridiculous. Deserts will spread, but they will contract. And someday I'm going to tell you why we've got the climate narrative wrong from the deep natural history perspective, and why deserts are so critical.
No, definitely.
Just talk would be a good idea.
Yes, definitely.
I don't know what if we have time now, we could close it and do a quick. I don't know
How long it will take?
I don't know what time it is. Oh, and I have to be at some
No,
place.
Pranay, we will definitely invite you once again after some time.
Thank you. You can tolerate me.
No,
this long.
this knowledge is fascinating, and I agree with you. Desert point. Karthik will come to you, but there are some online questions. One question is that are there any raptor in India? Second is any fossil found in West Bengal, and where there are theropods, the ancestral birds in India. These three questions we can take, then we can go to the next questions.
Okay. Any fossils found in West Bengal? Yes. Good fossils found in Darjeeling and the hills up in Mikir Hills. Very good fossils. The problem is, again, we have not documented them or recorded them, and so all those kind of problems. I don't know if you followed that story on Meghalaya fossil theft. There was this beautiful whale fossil in Meghalaya that was discovered. Perhaps that of Ambulocetus. Now, it was not a true whale, it was a pig-sized creature that actually went. It was a cross between perhaps Indo-Hyas and Ambulocetus. It's in my book. I can show you the photo. Beautiful. Now, what happened is somebody's stolen that fossil. We don't know who it is. People know it's worth something, so they will sell it to somebody. So, in the hills of starting from Meghalaya to Darjeeling and down south, not to Parasnath. Parasnath is a volcanic outcrop, so not in that side. But again, Talcher and Panchet side, again, you find beautiful fossils. Yes, please go ahead and hunt for fossils. Look at the index of my book and you will find sites. But again, please don't vandalize.
Actually, Pranay, I was in this Jaipur when this park called Kishan Bagh.
Yeah.
And there was some fossil which they have kept, and it was mentioned they have collected this from mining fields.
Yeah.
Like, this is fascinating to know, we can find a lot of fossils in mining sites. And there are collectors who actually get, I was talking to some people, and they were saying they actually go to the mining sites, they have contacts with the mining operators, and they buy fossils and they charge some premium over it. Then there is something they inform. There's a whole set of people who are tracking.
So the ones in Kishan Bagh are the ones salvaged because these had no economic value, so they were just picked up and brought here. So that's how it is.
So regions in India where we are most likely to find animal fossils. How can one identify it if we come across ones?
Yeah, Deepak, great question. India, I mean, just about every state has amazing fossils. I mean, depends what you're interested. Are you interested in mammal, fish, amphibians, reptiles, bats? Everything is found. I mean, again, depends on the age that you want. How well preserved is it? So again, Deepak, go ahead and buy my book, or if you don't want to buy it, download it free from several websites which are.
Even the only one who's saying this thing.
Let's see, authors don't make money. I mean, authors like us don't make money. So, but we want you to go and preserve, read, just read and try saving a site. For us, saving a.
Is it true this book Indica is going off the shelf? I heard somewhere.
Well, it's expensive. It's an expensive book, and this government has not been very keen on lowering taxes for publishing or the GST for paper. So all those things are compounding the problem of publishing, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, the publisher is circumspect about future editions in large numbers. So it's going to stay in small numbers. So keep buying.
But I think the Kindle version will be there, and I'm worried, like once after 1,000 years, then this whole online books where they will go. There are no remains of these books.
Yeah, I hope there's a fossil made out of Indica somewhere. In its case, stays preserved. I don't know how.
Ardavi, you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my question is rightly placed specifically for this talk, but this is something I have always wondered about. We often we are often hear that birds are one of the closest species to dinosaurs. So my question is specifically about one bird, which is pigeons. There we have seen a lot of in major Indian cities have seen an growth and overpopulation of pigeons at the cost of other smaller ecological species. And like I went for college in Jodhpur, and there was a huge pigeon situation there. And like in my understanding and general understanding also, pigeons I found to be dumber than other birds. Like a sparrow, and it enters the room, finds its way out easier than a pigeon. So I just want to understand whether that adds to their adaptability factor to concrete environments, and whether that is something that is contributing to the loss of smaller ecological species, or whether that's not a factor at all and it's just like overfeeding and things like that.
So I'll let the birder answer this because he knows this better.
No, I am not birder. I know this is like, as you said, like when you change the ecosystem, and pigeon people feed pigeon, so it is not in the natural environment. So if you go across Delhi and see that people habit to feed pigeon, even dogs also. Like even I'm a dog lover, but in nature there are like proper system. Like with this theory called survival of fittest. So if there are 5-6 eggs, then maybe one may not survive, one or two will survive. Same with other animals. But when we feed and you think, then the balance is like disturbed. I think this is I think I'm right.
Yeah, let me tell you 2 facts about pigeons, which I think are pretty interesting, which very few other birds do. Now, if you were to isolate a female pigeon and give her the nesting conditions and put a mirror next to it and keep it in isolation, chances are that it can reproduce without. So it's parthenocarpic. So there is some evidence of this.
Oh, really?
The second thing is that pigeons also are known to produce, some pigeons, a secretion from their chest which resembles milk. So in very difficult drought-like conditions, pigeons will survive. Right? It is incredible, but again, these 2 mysteries have not been kind of solved. And this parthenocarpy that's what it's called, the ability to produce eggs without fertilization. Right? And it has been noted only in a few cases in some pigeons. So it may not be true for the entire genus. And the second thing is they've also seen exudation, which resembled like milk. Could that be just freak anomalous behavior? We don't know. I mean, I have not read too much about this. Perhaps again.
No, actually, this is the reason. First they can survive harsh conditions. Secondly, we are also
proliferating them.
Yes, in urban cities mostly. Like you go to rural, you can still find other. I have seen in some cliffs, this Asian parrots fly catcher are replaced, pigeons are replacing them also.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
this is like some account. Yeah, definitely. Shall you want to ask something? Yeah,
there's one
okay. On the mic, please. On the mic.
So you mentioned blue whale cats. explosions, one before the dinosaurs came, one were decimated there. So is it okay for us to assume that in the aftermath of these volcanic explosion, all these little creatures survive and all the big ones are decimated because their big size is to be a disadvantage in survival situations?
Right. Big size is very disadvantageous during extinction events. And I think all large creatures were the first to die in most cases, unless they lived in water and survived for some reason, unless uh, the methane, for example, if when it happened in the sea, it killed most of the large creatures in the sea, but in rivers and ponds where the methane did not exude, they survived. So therefore, the ancestor of the crocodile survived, or the small shark survives. Sharks, as you know, live in fresh water. In fact, there's a beautiful shark species in the Ganga. Yes. Right. So it's called the gangetic shark. It's beautiful. I mean, it's so tiny, beautiful. You know, sharks don't have to be large. In fact, 90% of the shark species, or maybe 95% of all shark species, are very small and live in fresh water. They don't live in seawater, right, or in estuarine water. So, you know, again, this is our bias because Mr. Spielberg, I love Spielberg. So please don't get me wrong. But, you know, we've seen Jaws, right, a great film. But, you know, everybody imagines it to be that it's a sea-dwelling creature just there. That's not right. I mean, there's beautiful shark. So your point being that, you know, large creatures, how do they survive? So each extinction, burrowing animals of a certain size tend to do better, you know, than creatures that lived on, say, treetops or on the surface and were large. So large creatures, depending on surface. The other thing that makes rodents very good at survival, two things actually, why rats and mice and other creatures survive better, is not only the ability to burrow and live there when there's a cataclysm that happens, but also the fact that, you know, when so there's one gas called hydrogen sulfide. Now, in my book, I say this that, you know, some creatures survive better because it's found in slow gas, right? It smells of rotten eggs. It puts these small mammals and even small lizards and others to sleep, and for a very long sleep. It's like hibernation, but for much longer. And this only when oxygen or better any other new, the composition of the air changes, do they wake up, right? So it's like being on a very long dose of chloroform and but surviving, right? That's one thing. The other thing about rodents is very remarkable. It's about the placenta. So rodents use their placenta again and again. That's why they're able to breed so quickly. Rabbits also do the same. They retain the placenta. Horses and elephants and humans, they have to excrete the placenta, right? And that's why we take, you know, much longer to conceive our next baby, right? Unlike rabbits and say rodents, they have multiple cycles. They can have 2 or 3 cycles in a year, right?
Good point, but what discussion focusing on how people may not always, be interested in conserving dinosaur populations. I mean, general comment, but I feel like what plays into this is capitalism and its aesthetics, because if it's not of utility to people, then they will obviously not be interested in it. And aesthetics in the sense that sure, it's not something, like people like trinkets or whatever people would be predisposed to having in their homes. I mean, you only said it does not look very desirable. And I think you implied it in the conversation. So I feel aesthetics also play a role along with capitalism, immediately associated with consumption.
Let me stop you there. Last year, Sotheby's had an auction, and they sold an entire Stegosaurus for $168 million. And I believe it is one of the most contested auction ever to take place in Sotheby's. Auction of dinosaur fossils and many other items, not just dinosaur fossils, is a huge business. It's only in countries like India where we don't respect anything. Let's be clear. I mean, if you go to even the Indus Valley sites in Western UP or in Haryana, just go and see the condition. You could actually go to a farmer or collection of farmers and say, hey, listen, I'll give you 10,000 rupees if you find an entire matka or a figurine. 10,000 bucks, it's yours. Indus Valley. Nobody's even asking you. So it's as simple as that. Ask archaeologists how easy it is for you to get a Pala age or a Sunga age or a Gupta age statue from Bihar or northern Bengal. It's pretty simple, I mean, just you should just have that jugaad, right? In India, everything is jugaad, which is the saddest thing about it, right? So I think this capitalism, of course, it's actually promoting in some places where the capitalist greed is being leveraged by the grand museums, which are also corporations, right? But in India, it's not even leveraged in that sense because you don't see the larger vision of education and the money that you can make from the education of using fossils or whatever. Such a great opportunity, but not seen as one. I think the other thing, maybe just I know we are running out of time. One of the things that is missing in India, many countries actually, is that you go to say places like Germany, Sweden, some states in America. If you have a small room, this is quite large. I mean, much quarter the size of this room. They have displays of 3 or 4 fossils and 2 or 3 signages, right? And that's it. And they tell you what they found or what they find in that region, right? In fact, some of the best museums of the world have not more than 10 or 15 fossils, but they tell you such a grand story of that region. I should stop doing this, right? I look like drunk, sorry. Okay. So, I think we need to, look at how can we make small public places and talk about local stories. You can't respect what exists in Delhi. Let me give you an example of Delhi. What's unique about Delhi? Okay. There are 2 types of alluvium in Delhi, right? There's called the Varanasi alluvium, which is 22,000 years old. And on the west side, if you cross Gangaram Hospital side, it's called the Jaipur alluvium, right? Think about it. You've got 2 different types of alluvium soils that make Delhi. Of course, there are no fossils there. There are some fossils, but they are too tiny to talk about. But this is a story that our geography teachers are not telling us. Of course, they don't know it because they've not been taught.
Yes.
Right? The tragedy is the professionals who should be telling us the story don't communicate. So science communication is poor. Our education system or our educators do not go back to school. They don't keep up their learning. Of course, our textbooks are dead, right? So I think there's a chronic problem in the way we teach our children, talk to our children, and of course, the lack of inquisitiveness. I don't think we have a culture of inquisitiveness, curiosity. We don't foster curiosity. So writing this book is actually taking out your bhadas. Did India ever have dinosaurs? Yes, we did. So I'm taking out my bhadas and telling my teachers or whoever, everybody who tried teaching me something that listen, you didn't teach me about this. So it could be one way of looking at it.
No, Pranay, I can fully relate with this because see, I did my zoology honors. And to tell you, first time I came to know about the bear species of India when I went to Mirzapur for my masters. I know India has 4 species of bear. What we read was polar bear or grizzly bear. Even the Jungle Book, the movies we see, the grizzly bears. They don't hibernate, so they don't hibernate. Our zoology is a subject which we should be reading, and only we never read any Indian species. All the foreign species, all foreign things. This is how the education system is. We are not taught about our Indian wildlife, and it is our own interest that now things are changing, but only if you go to WI or some wildlife institution, then you will know about Indian species.
That's
so this awareness at the ground level is not happening. Even if you ask any convent school or any public school here, they will choking at polar bear. So this is our tiger, charismatic disease. So one last question, Pranay, and we'll close this.
yes.
This question has been in my mind because we have 2 layers of climate change. One say climate change, we should stop climate change, it is happening. And some people just deny it, like Trump. So, and of course, leaders from a country. So I think that climate change question. When I talk to some senior officers, senior scientists who are well educated, they say like climate change hota hai. And this has been happening since millions of years. All this thing happened. Then why should we worried about it? So Pranay, why should we worry about climate change?
Okay, good question. Again, my other presentation would have answered it.
But I'm asking all the questions.
So, okay, climate has changed in the past. That's how we have creatures, living creatures evolving, some dying, some living, some persisting. This climate change that we are watching now is one which is problematic because it is happening at such a pace that the evolutionary trajectories of all creatures is going to get compromised. We will adapt because we engineer our lives, we engineer everything, right? But creatures will not, right? They take their time, their DNA takes time to, evolve.
Pranay, you said 95% species gone extinct during that volcanic eruption.
Yeah,
so
methane.
That figure to I think 10-20 years is.
Yeah, I mean, so we are at that brink. I mean, what Elizabeth Colbert says that we are facing the 6th extinction without us knowing is true. The challenge is that we don't have the adaptation mechanism because of the reasons I told you. We've broken all our landscapes, and we are, I mean, not just. So the other problem is not just the ecological bit. I mean, there is a huge amount of denial even within the scientists because one scientist doesn't talk to the other, and they don't understand the larger picture. The second problem is that the current mechanisms are driven by economics and largely fueled by politics. What is most convenient is being pushed. Tree planting will save us. It's not going to save you. Had we done it till the 1970s, we would have been saved. Perhaps till maybe late 80s, maybe. But now, tree planting alone is not going to save you. What's going to save you in tree planting is the soil. Again, we might be doing the right thing, but without knowing what the thing it's going to do, right? We don't have mechanisms to save the ocean. Ocean absorbs about 80 to 85% of all the world's heat, right? Oceans is the place where all the free oxygen is produced. Trees don't produce oxygen. Remember this. They produce oxygen, which they'll consume the next day. All the oxygen and the carbon burial that happens is in the oceans, not on land, right? So currently, IPCC, the certification companies, the certification agencies, all of them are focused on land. They don't consider ocean as a major area of intervention. And I don't think there are economic instruments, whether in terms of investors or in terms of policy, that look at this. So I think we are facing our biggest enemy is us. It's not that climate is changing. I mean, climate will restore itself if we sit back and let nature take its corrective course, let nature heal. There's so many parts that can actually work together again, despite us having broken them up. To finally answer your question on whether climate change now is any different from the past, it is because we've added a small amount of carbon dioxide in terms of how much it was earlier, but thing is, we are ending the ice age that actually created the modern human. Remember that 72,000, or rather 100,000 years ago, when both the ice caps were formed, humans left Africa and populated the earth, right? Now, that event is the one that we are compromising. The very things that were the cause of our birth are the ones that we are distorting and killing, right? Remember that all modern birds evolved around 30,000 years ago. You know, the kingfisher that you're looking at outside, or the egret or whatever, all of them evolved, they're modern birds, right? The evolutionary process has not ended. But what we are doing is we're cutting that process because we are breaking landscapes, we are ruining ecosystems, and we are mixing species from left, right, and center, right? I mean, Ethiopian coffee, for example, we all love coffee. I had some coffee. I'm sure this is not Ethiopian, but coffee that comes from Ethiopia gets no money. So there's no reason for them to protect the original coffee tree forests. It's gone to Java, where we've taken out the Javanese trees or the Kenyan grasslands or the highlands, and we've taken out the trees from there to plant coffee. So we are eating ourselves. Where is the biodiversity? And we give biodiversity credits to these plantations because they've got an intercrop of other trees, local trees. That's not biodiversity. It's wrong. So we are eating ourselves to death.
I think, Pranay, that was a good concluding note. So that saves my time also. So thank you very much, Pranay, for coming here. I know you are on a very short time in Delhi and you took out time. And today also you are busy somewhere. But thank you very much
Thank you
for coming us and sharing your thoughts and opinions, which are very useful. Because usually we see things in very single perspective. And this kind of discussion actually opens up our thoughts and also way to see things differently. And thanks to all of you for
thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Midweek.
Thank you.